Ambitious conquests, when dreams of empire meet reality. On a frigid morning in 218 BCE, a young Carthaginian general stood at the foot of the Alps, gazing upward at the snow-capped peaks that had swallowed entire armies before him. Behind him stretched a column of 37,000 soldiers, 2,000 cavalry, and, most remarkably, 37 war elephants. Hannibal Barca was about to attempt what many considered impossible, crossing the highest mountain range in Europe with a full army and its complement of African elephants. Nearly 5 centuries earlier, on the sun-baked plains of Central Asia, another ambitious commander had set out with an equally audacious dream. Alexander of Macedon, not yet the Great, led his men eastward toward the edge of the known world, determined to surpass even the gods in glory. His soldiers would march until the stars themselves seemed strange and unfamiliar in the Indian sky. These moments, when human ambition collides with the very limits of possibility, define the greatest military campaigns in history. They are instances when a single person's vision became so compelling that thousands would follow them into the unknown, across deserts, through jungles, and over mountains that seemed to touch the heavens themselves. This is a book about 5 such campaigns, endeavors so vast in scope and ambition that they altered the course of civilization itself. It's about the thin line between brilliance and madness, between the kind of audacity that reshapes worlds and the hubris that destroys empires. From Hannibal's elephants trumpeting in the Alpine snow to Zheng He's massive treasure ships plying unknown seas, these stories remind us that the greatest limits we face are often the ones we place upon ourselves. In each of these campaigns, we'll find moments when everything hung by a thread, when a single decision, a chance storm, or an act of betrayal could have changed the entire course of history. We'll meet generals who were also diplomats, engineers, and visionaries. We'll see how their ambitions were shaped by personal vendettas, divine prophecies, and dreams of glory that would outlive them by millennia. But most importantly, we'll discover that these weren't just military campaigns, they were human adventures on an epic scale. They were moments when the impossible became possible, when maps had to be redrawn, and when the world itself seemed to grow larger overnight. Let us begin with the young king who set out to conquer the world, and in doing so, changed it forever. Alexander's vision, transforming continents. The Macedonian phalanx stood paralyzed, not by enemy spears or Persian arrows, but by the deafening roar of the Hydaspes River. It was June 326 BCE, and the monsoon rains had transformed the normally placid waters into a raging torrent. On the opposite bank, King Porus of the Parava kingdom had assembled hundreds of war elephants, living siege engines that could shatter the tightest military formation. Alexander's men, who had marched over 11,000 miles from Greece, finally balked. This surely was a step too far. But Alexander saw something his men didn't. While Porus watched the main camp with its thousands of campfires, Alexander noticed a wooded bend upstream that could conceal a crossing. That night, in the midst of a thunderstorm that masked the sound of their movements, he led a select force through the deluge. By dawn, he had outflanked the seemingly impregnable Indian position. The impossible once again proved merely difficult. This was Alexander's genius, not just military prowess, but the ability to transform geographic obstacles into strategic advantages. 10 years earlier, he had inherited a kingdom from his assassinated father, Philip II. While others saw a completed conquest of Greece, Alexander saw only a launching pad for something far grander, a march to the very edges of the world. His campaign began with a bold stroke that would become his signature. At the Granicus River in 334 BCE, he personally led the cavalry charge against the Persian forces, his white-plumed helmet making him conspicuous to friend and foe alike. An enemy axe shattered his helmet and nearly ended the campaign before it truly began. But this near-death experience only fueled his growing sense of divine destiny. The logistics of Alexander's march defied conventional wisdom. His army functioned as a moving city-state, complete with historians, scientists, engineers, and surveyors. While other conquerors simply dominated territory, Alexander founded cities, 70 of them, each designed to serve as a cultural fusion point between East and West. Alexandria in Egypt became the greatest of these, but others stretched like pearls along his route from the Mediterranean to the Hindu Kush. His siege of Tyre in 332 BCE demonstrated this comprehensive approach. When the island city proved unreachable, Alexander didn't withdraw. He built a causeway through the sea itself. His engineers constructed a mole nearly half a mile long while under constant attack, eventually connecting the island to the mainland. That causeway still stands today, a testament to ambition made manifest in stone and sand. But it was in Babylon that Alexander revealed the full scope of his vision. After defeating Darius III, he didn't simply occupy the Persian capital. He adopted aspects of Persian court ceremony and began actively promoting intermarriage between his Macedonian officers and Persian noblewomen. He himself married the Bactrian princess Roxana, declaring that his empire would be a true fusion of cultures, not merely a Greek overlay. This cultural revolution sparked the first serious resistance from his own men. His adoption of Persian customs, including the practice of proskynesis, ritual prostration, struck many Macedonians as a betrayal of their values. The murder of his critic Clitus, whom Alexander killed in a drunken rage, revealed the growing tensions between the king's expanding vision and his troops' more limited ambitions. Yet the army followed him deeper into unknown territories, across the Hindu Kush through modern Afghanistan and into the Punjab. They fought against war elephants, navigated treacherous mountain passes, and endured scorching deserts. Alexander's wound from a poisoned arrow during the siege of Multan nearly proved fatal, but he recovered to press even further east. The final act came at the Hyphasis River, modern Beas. Beyond lay the powerful Nanda Empire and tales of even more fantastic kingdoms. But here, finally, his army's endurance met its limit. For the first and only time, Alexander's men refused to march further. Standing at the edge of his conquests, Alexander sacrificed to the gods and built 12 massive altars, each taller than a siege tower, to mark the eastern limit of his journey. The return march through the Gedrosian Desert claimed more lives than any battle. Alexander led his army along unexplored southern routes, determined to go where no Greek army had ventured before. Even in retreat, he pushed the boundaries of the possible. In the end, Alexander's vision proved too vast for one lifetime. He died in Babylon at age 32, his plans for an Arabian campaign left unrealized. But his march had fundamentally altered 3 continents, creating links between cultures that would persist for centuries. The Hellenistic age he ushered in would see Greek ideas flow east, while Eastern philosophy, science, and art moved west, creating a cultural exchange that would help shape the modern world. His final words, according to some accounts, were "to the strongest." But his true legacy wasn't military strength. It was the demonstration that the known world could be transformed by the power of a vision bold enough to transcend cultural boundaries. His march to India wasn't just a military campaign. It was humanity's first great step toward a truly interconnected world, Hannibal's ingenious Alpine crossing. Dawn broke over the Rhone River in autumn 218 BCE, revealing a sight that made local Gauls question their sanity. Carthaginian engineers were building what appeared to be a floating garden. Giant rafts bloomed with dirt, grass, and vegetation, a bizarre botanical project that would prove to be the key to moving 37 war elephants across frigid mountain passes. This was Hannibal Barca's solution to what seemed an impossible physics problem: how to convince multi-ton beasts accustomed to African heat to walk across ice and snow. The floating gardens were just the first act of an engineering revolution that would shake Rome to its foundations. Hannibal wasn't just moving an army. He was orchestrating a logistical symphony involving 37,000 infantry, 2,000 cavalry, and dozens of elephants through terrain that would challenge modern military planners. Every step required innovation, from crafting special shoes for the elephants to developing new methods for moving siege engines up near vertical slopes. 8 years earlier, at age 26, Hannibal had sworn a blood oath to his father Hamilcar. "I swear that so soon as age will permit, I will use fire and steel to arrest the destiny of Rome." Now he was fulfilling that vow in the most dramatic way possible, by taking a route the Romans considered so impractical they hadn't even bothered to defend it. The crossing itself began in late September, timed precisely between the summer heat that would exhaust his troops and the winter storms that would make passage impossible. Local tribes, impressed by Hannibal's diplomatic skills and generous payments, provided crucial intelligence about passes and weather patterns. But not all tribes could be bought. The Allobroges saw an opportunity in the vulnerable column of troops winding through narrow defiles. The first major attack came at a bottleneck where the path narrowed between a steep cliff and a dizzying drop. The Allobroges rolled boulders and unleashed avalanches on the struggling column. Hannibal's response revealed his tactical genius. He split his forces, sending light troops up the slopes at night to occupy the high ground. When dawn came and the Allobroges attacked the main column, they found themselves caught between two forces. The ensuing battle nearly sent both armies tumbling into the abyss. But nature proved a far deadlier enemy than mountain tribes. As the army climbed higher, the air thinned and temperatures plunged. The Mediterranean troops, many of whom had never seen snow, watched in horror as their comrades slipped on hidden ice and vanished into crevasses. The elephants, whose hot weather biology made them particularly vulnerable to cold, began to show signs of distress. Here, Hannibal revealed another dimension of his genius: psychological warfare. He gathered his shivering troops and pointed to the warm plains of Italy visible in the distance. "You are climbing not just the walls of Alps," he declared, "but the walls of Rome itself." The speech transformed the army's perspective. Every frozen step became not an ordeal, but an investment in Rome's eventual destruction. The final descent proved even more treacherous than the ascent. An avalanche had destroyed a section of the path, creating a sheer drop that stretched for 300 feet. Hannibal's engineers, by now operating on the edge of exhaustion, undertook one of the ancient world's most remarkable construction projects. They built a switchback road down the cliff face, working in shifts around the clock. When normal tools proved inadequate, they turned to an unprecedented technique: heating the rocks with fire, then cracking them by pouring over vinegar carried for just such a purpose. The army that emerged onto the plains of the Po was half the size of the force that had begun the journey. Every surviving soldier was a living testament to human endurance, and every surviving elephant a monument to engineering ingenuity. But numbers tell only part of the story. What emerged was not just an army, but a psychological weapon that would haunt Roman nightmares for generations. News of the crossing sent shockwaves through Rome. The Senate had assumed their northern frontier was secured by the Alps themselves, a wall of rock and ice that no sane commander would challenge. Now that wall had been breached by an army with elephants. The psychological impact was devastating. Roman citizens began seeing Carthaginian elephants in their dreams. Mothers quieted unruly children with whispers of "Hannibal ad portas," Hannibal is at the gates. What followed would be 16 years of warfare that transformed the Italian peninsula into a living laboratory of military innovation. Hannibal's tactical genius would reach its apex at Cannae, where he would execute history's first documented double envelopment maneuver. But it was the crossing of the Alps that marked him as something more than a mere general. It revealed him as an engineer, a logistician, and a leader capable of inspiring men to attempt the impossible. The last of Hannibal's elephants died at the Battle of Trebia, but their impact on history far outlived them. The crossing of the Alps redefined what was possible in warfare, demonstrating that with sufficient ingenuity, even the most formidable natural barriers could be overcome. 2 millennia later, when Napoleon contemplated his own Alpine crossing, he studied reports of Hannibal's route. a testament to how thoroughly one Carthaginian general's audacity had rewritten the rules of military ambition. Genghis Khan, architect of the largest land empire. The Jin dynasty's sentinels atop the Great Wall peered north into the Gobi Desert, straining to spot approaching armies. But in 1211, death came not in the traditional wave of howling warriors, but through an invisible network of spies, diplomats, and merchants that had already thoroughly mapped every watchtower, garrison, and grain depot along the frontier. When Genghis Khan's forces finally appeared, they seemed to materialize from the very dust of the steppes, striking precisely where the wall was weakest. This was warfare reinvented. The boy who had once been abandoned to starve on the steppes had grown into a military innovator who would redraw the map of Eurasia. Genghis Khan's great insight was recognizing that the traditional raid and retreat tactics of nomadic warfare were obsolete. Instead, he forged something unprecedented, a professional army that combined Mongolian horsemanship with Chinese siege technology, Persian administrative systems, and a revolutionary approach to military organization. The decimal system became his first great innovation. Every warrior knew his precise place in units of 10, 100, 1,000, or 10,000, regardless of tribal affiliation. Merit, not birth, determined rank. A shepherd's son could command a nobleman if he proved more capable. This meritocracy created a level of tactical flexibility that left traditional armies baffled. Each Mongolian unit could fight independently or seamlessly, combine into larger formations. Communication became his secret weapon. The YAM system, a network of relay stations spaced a day's ride apart, allowed messages to travel from Korea to Persia in weeks rather than months. Generals could coordinate massive, complex campaigns across distances that would have been unmanageable for any previous empire. During the campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire, Mongol armies separated by hundreds of miles executed perfectly timed pincer movements, trapping their enemies in operations of unprecedented scale. His siege warfare revolutionized military engineering. When faced with Chinese fortifications, Genghis Khan didn't just recruit Chinese engineers. He created an entire corps of siege specialists who would travel with the army, analyzing defenses and developing new solutions. They learned to divert rivers, to undermine walls, build rotating mangonels that could strike from any angle, and use gunpowder in ways its Chinese inventors hadn't imagined. The campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire in 1219 demonstrated this new kind of warfare in its most terrifying form. When Shah Muhammad broke a trade agreement and executed Mongol ambassadors, Genghis responded with a campaign of unprecedented sophistication. Multiple armies moved in coordination across thousands of miles, each capable of operating independently, but all working toward a common strategy. Cities were given a choice. Immediate surrender meant merchants and artisans would be spared and local government preserved. Resistance meant annihilation. Bukhara fell first. The great Khan rode his horse into the city's main mosque and declared himself the flail of God. But it was at Samarkand that his new approach to warfare proved its worth. Instead of launching a costly frontal assault, he had his armies stage elaborate false retreats day after day, until the defenders were drawn into a massive ambush that broke their will to resist. His campaigns introduced psychological warfare on a scale never before seen. Merchants and travelers were allowed to flee cities under siege, carrying tales of Mongol invincibility that weakened resistance in cities not yet attacked. The Khan's intelligence network spread rumors of Mongol armies being twice their actual size, of supernatural powers, of inevitable doom. Cities began surrendering at the mere report of Mongol armies approaching. The invasion of Europe in 1241 marked perhaps his greatest tactical achievement, though he didn't live to see it. Under his successor Ogedei, Mongol armies conducted a winter campaign across the frozen rivers of Russia into the heart of Eastern Europe. When Hungarian and Polish heavy cavalry charged Mongol forces at Mohi and Legnica, they found themselves attacking ghost armies, light cavalry that retreated, divided, and surrounded their pursuers in what became known as the Mongol Trap. But Genghis Khan's most lasting innovation was cultural. Unlike previous nomadic conquerors, he didn't just destroy, he built. He protected merchants, fostered international trade, and established a vast network of cultural exchange. The Pax Mongolica created the first true Eurasian community, where Chinese porcelain could be found in Poland, Persian astronomers could debate with their Chinese counterparts, and European silver could pay for goods in Karakoram. His death in 1227 came not in battle, but, according to some sources, from injuries sustained in a fall from his horse while hunting. The empire he built would continue to expand, eventually stretching from Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to Tibet. It was an achievement that would remain unmatched, the largest contiguous land empire in history, built by a man who had started with nothing but a brilliant mind and an unshakable determination to reshape the world. Near the end of his life, the great Khan reportedly said, "I have conquered an empire from horseback, but I cannot rule it from horseback." It was perhaps his final insight, that conquest requires one set of skills, rule another. The systems he put in place to manage his vast empire would influence governments for centuries to come, from Russia to China. His greatest legacy wasn't just the land he conquered, but the new world he built atop the old. Caesar's conquest and cultural transformation of Gaul. How Rome tamed the north. The first Helvetii refugees stumbled into Roman territory in early 58 BCE, carrying tales of an entire nation on the move. Behind them marched 370,000 people, an entire civilization seeking new lands. Julius Caesar, deep in debt and searching for military glory, saw not a humanitarian crisis but an opportunity. Within days, he had left Rome's marble columns far behind, racing north with a speed that would become his trademark. The conquest of Gaul had begun. What followed was not just a military campaign, but a masterclass in combining propaganda, engineering, and psychological warfare. Caesar's annual dispatches to Rome, the famous commentaries, transformed complex Celtic politics into a compelling narrative of civilization versus barbarism. Each victory was dramatized, each setback minimized, every action justified. He wasn't just conquering Gaul, he was crafting his own legend in real time. The siege of the Helvetii at Bibracte demonstrated Caesar's flair for the dramatic. Running low on supplies, he swung his army in a bold arc around the migrating tribe, placing his forces between them and their destination. The resulting battle became a race against starvation for both sides. Caesar's troops fought with empty stomachs, knowing that defeat meant annihilation. The Helvetii fought for survival, their wagons containing their entire civilization. When victory came, Caesar ordered the survivors to return to their homeland, a show of mercy that doubled as a strategic buffer against German expansion. Innovation marked every aspect of the campaign. At the River Aisne, Caesar's engineers built a bridge in a single day, stunning Gallic observers who had never seen Roman construction techniques. But it was at Alesia where engineering genius reached its apex. Caesar faced Vercingetorix, a charismatic Gallic leader who had united the tribes in revolt. Trapped in the hilltop fortress of Alesia with 80,000 warriors, Vercingetorix expected a standard siege. Instead, Caesar built 2 rings of fortifications, an inner wall to trap the Gauls and an outer wall to protect against the relief army he knew would come. The numbers were staggering: 24 forts, 34 catapult positions, multiple lines of trenches filled with sharpened stakes, and a kill zone engineered to funnel attacking forces into precise killing grounds. When 250,000 Gallic warriors arrived to relieve the siege, they found themselves attempting to break through the most sophisticated defensive system ever created. The battle became a 3-way struggle between the trapped defenders, the relief force, and Caesar's outnumbered legions caught in between. But Caesar's greatest weapon was information. His network of Celtic allies provided crucial intelligence about tribal politics and terrain. He learned to exploit intertribal rivalries, playing one group against another. The Aedui, Rome's longtime allies, became his bridge to Gallic aristocracy. He sent their sons to Roman schools, introduced them to Roman luxury goods, and created a pro-Roman faction that would outlast his campaign. The scale of cultural transformation was unprecedented. Caesar established colonial settlements that became modern Paris, Lyon, and other major cities. Roman merchants followed the legions, introducing new goods and economic systems. Latin began to mix with Celtic languages. Within a generation, Gallic nobles were wearing togas, speaking Latin, and sending their children to Roman schools. His famous crossing of the Rhine in 55 BCE exemplified this fusion of military and cultural power. Rather than simply cross the river, Caesar built a bridge of unprecedented sophistication in 10 days. German tribes watched in awe as Roman engineering conquered a river they considered a natural barrier. After exactly 18 days in German territory, Caesar returned across the bridge and had it destroyed, a clear message about Roman power and restraint. The British expeditions of 55 and 54 BCE pushed the boundaries of known geography. Though largely unsuccessful, these campaigns captured Rome's imagination. Caesar's descriptions of tidal patterns, tribal customs, and British war chariots created an image of Britain that would influence Roman policy for centuries. His account of Druids and their rituals would shape European perspectives on Celtic culture for millennia. When Vercingetorix finally surrendered at Alesia, throwing his weapons at Caesar's feet, it marked more than just the end of Gallic independence. It represented the triumph of a new kind of warfare that combined military might with cultural assimilation. The conquered territories weren't just occupied, they were transformed. Within decades, Gauls would serve in the Roman Senate, command Roman legions, and even become Roman emperors. Caesar's conquest reshaped both Rome and Gaul. The wealth and military experience he gained made him too powerful for the Roman Republic to control, setting the stage for civil war and the birth of the Roman Empire. But it also created the foundation of French and German civilization, introducing technologies, urban planning, and legal concepts that would survive the fall of Rome itself. In the end, Caesar didn't just conquer territory, he created a new world. His campaigns in Gaul became a template for how military conquest could be combined with cultural transformation to create lasting change. When he crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE to seize power in Rome, he did so with an army trained in Gaul and with resources gathered there. The conquest that began as a political gambit had become the foundation of an imperial destiny. Zheng He's maritime expeditions, Ming China's forgotten bid for naval supremacy. In 1405, the harbor of Nanjing witnessed something unprecedented in human history. A fleet of ships so vast it darkened the horizon prepared to set sail. At its heart were the treasure ships, vessels that stretched 440 feet in length, their 9 masts soaring into the sky, their red sails emblazoned with dragons. Leading this armada was a most unlikely admiral, a former palace eunuch who had risen from slavery to become China's greatest maritime commander. Zheng He stood on the flagship's deck, a towering figure at nearly 7 feet tall. Born Ma He to a Muslim family in Yunnan province, he had been captured and castrated as a boy during the Ming conquest. Yet this early trauma forged rather than broke him. His mathematical brilliance and diplomatic skills caught the emperor's attention, transforming a palace servant into the commander of the largest naval expedition in pre-modern history. The numbers defied comprehension. 317 ships carrying 28,000 men, including diplomats, translators, astronomers, cartographers, physicians, and soldiers. The treasure ships themselves were technological marvels, featuring watertight compartments, stern post-mounted rudders, and advanced compasses that could navigate through monsoons. Their holds carried porcelain, silk, and gold for trade and diplomacy, while their gun decks bristled with bronze cannons that could unleash devastating broadsides. The first destination was Champa, modern Vietnam, but this was merely the beginning. Zheng He's orders were breathtaking in scope: to proceed westward across the Indian Ocean, establishing Chinese prestige and opening maritime trade routes. It was soft power projection on an unprecedented scale, backed by overwhelming naval superiority. At Malacca, he established a permanent Chinese presence at the strait's crucial choke point, transforming a pirate haven into a major trading hub. In Ceylon, he intervened in a civil war, capturing a local ruler who had attempted to seize Chinese gifts. The captured king was transported to Nanjing in chains, a dramatic demonstration of Chinese power projection thousands of miles from home waters. The fleet's arrival at Calicut in India marked a pivotal moment in naval history. Arab traders who had dominated Indian Ocean commerce for centuries watched in amazement as Chinese ships larger than anything they had ever seen anchored in the harbor. Zheng He's diplomatic skills proved as formidable as his ships. He established trading relationships that would persist for generations, exchanging Chinese porcelain and silk for spices, ivory, and precious stones. Innovation marked every aspect of the voyages. The fleet's formation was designed to be visible from miles away, an intentional display of overwhelming force that usually prevented conflict before it began. When piracy threatened trade routes near Sumatra, Zheng He deployed a new tactic. Smaller, faster ships would lure pirates into ambush zones where the massive treasure ships waited, their broadsides capable of obliterating entire pirate fleets. The expeditions reached their zenith with the journey to Africa's east coast. At Malindi, in modern Kenya, giraffes and zebras were loaded onto specialized ships for transport back to the Ming court. Zheng He erected stone tablets in local ports declaring Chinese sovereignty over the maritime routes. These monuments, some of which survive today, were written in multiple languages, a testament to the multicultural nature of his enterprise. The fleet's navigational achievements were staggering. Using a combination of stellar observation, magnetic compasses, and detailed charts, they mastered the monsoon patterns of the Indian Ocean. Their maps were so accurate that portions were still used by Chinese mariners into the 20th century. The astronomer's deck on each treasure ship featured sophisticated instruments for calculating latitude, while depth-sounding techniques helped create detailed profiles of underwater topography. But perhaps most remarkable was the fleet's medical corps. Each major vessel carried physicians skilled in both Chinese and Islamic medicine. They established hospitals at major ports, treating local populations and gathering medical knowledge from across the Indian Ocean world. Their detailed records of tropical diseases and treatments became foundational texts in Chinese maritime medicine. In total, Zheng He commanded 7 expeditions between 1405 and 1433, reaching as far as Arabia and Africa's Swahili coast. Over 30 modern nations were visited by his fleet. The scale of this achievement becomes clear when compared to European voyages of the same era. His ships could have carried Columbus's entire fleet on their decks with room to spare. Yet at the height of its naval supremacy, Ming China made a decision that would alter world history. After Zheng He's death, conservative Confucian officials gained the emperor's ear. They argued that the expeditions were wasteful, that China should focus inward rather than outward. The great ships were left to rot, their records largely destroyed. Within a century, building a ship with more than 2 masts became a capital offense. This retreat from maritime power created a vacuum that would eventually be filled by European navigators. When Portuguese ships reached the Indian Ocean in the next century, they found only stories and monuments testifying to the great Chinese fleets that had once dominated these waters. Zheng He's voyages represent one of history's great what-ifs. For a brief moment, China stood poised to become the world's dominant maritime power, connecting East Asia with Africa and the Middle East in a vast trading network. The technology, resources, and organizational capacity existed to create a Chinese maritime empire centuries before European powers would achieve anything similar. Instead, these expeditions became a remarkable footnote, a demonstration of power without the will to maintain it. The paradox of ambition. Lessons from history's greatest conquests. Epilogue. The price of ambition. History's most ambitious military campaigns share a curious paradox. Their greatest victories often planted the seeds of their own undoing. Alexander's cultural fusion fragmented his empire after his death. Hannibal's tactical brilliance drew Rome into becoming the very military superpower he sought to prevent. Genghis Khan's efficient administration system transformed the nomads into urbanites within a few generations. Caesar's conquest of Gaul created an army so loyal to him personally that it destroyed the very republic he claimed to serve. Zheng He's fleets demonstrated China's potential for global power just before its greatest retreat from the world stage. Yet their legacies endure in ways their architects never imagined. Modern Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province still contains villages that claim descent from Alexander's soldiers, their residents occasionally born with striking green eyes. Hannibal's Alpine crossing routes are now threaded with highways and rail tunnels, his ancient paths marked by markers guiding modern travelers. The Mongol Empire's postal system laid the groundwork for the Silk Road that would shape Eurasian commerce for centuries. Caesar's Gallic towns evolved into the great cities of modern France. Zheng He's navigational techniques, preserved in secretive fishing communities, helped guide Chinese mariners well into the modern era. These campaigns reveal certain immutable truths about human ambition. The first is that technological innovation alone never guarantees success. It's the synthesis of new tools with novel strategies that changes history. Alexander's adoption of Persian administrative systems proved as crucial as his phalanx tactics. Hannibal's psychological warfare devastated Roman morale more effectively than his elephants. The Mongols' communication network proved more decisive than their compound bows. Caesar's propaganda reshaped Gallic identity more permanently than his legions. Zheng He's diplomatic corps achieved more lasting influence than his massive ships. The second truth is that the most successful campaigns transcended mere military conquest to achieve cultural transformation. Each of these leaders understood that lasting power requires more than victory in battle. It demands reshaping how the conquered view themselves and their place in the world. This insight marks the difference between conquests that collapsed immediately and those that transformed societies for generations. A third pattern emerges in studying these campaigns: the critical role of individual will. Each succeeded initially because a single person's vision proved powerful enough to overcome entrenched opposition, geographic obstacles, and the conventional wisdom of their era. Yet this same concentrated will often proved their undoing. When the visionary departed, their creations frequently proved too personal, too dependent on individual genius to sustain themselves. These lessons resonate in our own time. Modern military planners still study these campaigns, finding in them eternal principles about logistics, motivation, and the limits of human endurance. Silicon Valley entrepreneurs reference Genghis Khan's meritocracy and communication networks. Political leaders still grapple with Alexander's challenge of cultural integration and Caesar's balance of force and persuasion. Perhaps most relevantly, these campaigns demonstrate both the power and peril of transformative ambition. Each leader believed they were building something that would last millennia. None succeeded exactly as they envisioned. Yet their efforts reshaped the world in ways that continue to influence us today, often in domains far removed from military affairs. The salt flats of Tunisia still contain Carthaginian ruins. The Great Wall of China bears scars from Mongol sieges. Roman roads still thread through French vineyards. These physical remnants, however impressive, pale beside the intangible legacies, the trade routes, cultural connections, and transformed identities that outlived their creators by centuries. As humanity stands on the brink of new frontiers, space exploration, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, these ancient campaigns offer both inspiration and warning. They remind us that the most ambitious human endeavors often produce unintended consequences that dwarf their original goals. They teach us that true innovation requires synthesizing technology with human factors. Most importantly, they demonstrate that the greatest transformations in history occur when technical capability aligns with strategic vision and cultural understanding. The price of ambition these campaigns suggest is not just measured in resources expended or lives lost, but in the weight of responsibility for changes that cascade through centuries. As we contemplate our own ambitious projects, we would do well to remember both the brilliant innovations and cautionary tales preserved in these ancient endeavors. For in the end, these were not just military campaigns, they were attempts to reshape the world itself. Their successes and failures continue to echo in our laws, our languages, our trade routes, and our dreams of what determined leadership can achieve. In studying them, we learn not just about our past, but about the eternal human drive to transform the world through bold action and daring vision.